No Cap Fund presents The Representation Station. All right, welcome back. It's The Representation Station, and I am your host, Jeff Mayhew. Tonight on the show, we have a very special guest, Mr. James Jim Pethokoukis, the author of The Conservative Futurist, is joining us tonight to talk about Walter's favorite topic, besides uncapping the house, AI. But before we get to Jim, let's go around the horn and introduce ourselves. Walter, would you start us off tonight?
Hey everyone, my name is Walter Clapp. I was born in Texas. I live in Laramie, Wyoming, where the No Cap Fund is headquartered and the Representation Foundation. I'm a lawyer. I talk about all things representation, good representation for clients, be it by a plumber, an electrician, a doctor, a lawyer, a CPA. If you've got questions, bring them to me. And we can also talk about electoral representation, my favorite topic. And you also see a team of horses and a trail of dogs and animals following around most places I go. And if you go find me on the internet, and look forward to bringing you into the fold and getting to know the rest of these folks, especially Jim. Roger, over to you.
Yes, good evening. My name's Roger Scott. I'm the resident curmudgeon. I'm a CPA in North Carolina, husband and father. I, too, find representation to be extremely important. Again, as a CPA, as Walter was saying, representing clients. But even more so than that, my mission in life is the repeal of the I'm sorry, we don't say permanent anymore. The repeal of the Reapportionment Act of 1929. That's my mission in life.
Jim?
And I'm James Pethokoukis. My full-time gig is as a policy analyst at the American Enterprise Institute. I'm also an official contributor with CNBC. I also write a multiple times a week newsletter called Faster Please about economic growth and technological progress. And I'm the author of the 2023 book, The Conservative Futurist, How to Create the Sci-Fi World We Were Promised. And I'm here in Washington, D.C.
Awesome. I appreciate you joining us. I'm a big fan of the book, as many of our listeners might know. It's sitting right behind me there. So I'm Jeff Mayhew. I am a husband and a father of 5. I'm a regular blue-collar guy. My dad's a mechanic, my mom's a banker, and I own a small business. I discovered this thing about representation about 5 years ago. I got politically active. I started reading a whole bunch of books, and here I am today, being a crazy person, doing a live broadcast instead of spending time with my family trying to uncap the House of Representatives. But tonight we're going to talk about AI. Walter seems to think that uncapping the House is the best way to prevent us from AI overlords. We may or may not agree on that, but we'll get into it a little bit more. But before we get to our main topic tonight, has anybody seen, you see the books behind me, I've got James Garfield behind me. Have anybody seen the new Death by Lightning show on Netflix? I know Roger has. Walter, have you watched it yet?
I did.
The whole show or just the first episode?
Just the first episode. So
okay.
Yeah.
So for those who haven't seen it, it tells the story of James Garfield, his election and his assassination. And in the first episode, I think it's really important for our listeners or people out there who want to make change in the world to see. It's the Republican National Convention. The Republican Party is basically like the dominant party of the time. It's this post-Civil War time. The Democratic Party is very, small at this period of time, in power at least. And Ulysses S. Grant is the favorite, but he doesn't have enough votes to win the nomination. He's being challenged by John Sherman and James G. Blaine. Neither of these candidates are wildly popular, and it's a split vote. Nobody can get to the number that they need to get to win. Blaine and Sherman are trying to stop Grant from winning because Roscoe Conkling and the corrupt faction in New York, the port of New York, and the way that they use the spoils system is a really big problem. They want reform, but they have no path to victory. James Garfield comes to the convention to give a speech to nominate John Sherman, and he electrifies the crowd. And I think the show does a great job of illustrating this. Now, there's some things in the show that are a little historically inaccurate. I think it shows that he got a vote on the first round. He did not get a vote in the first round. But eventually, people start voting for Garfield. And this is kind of upsetting to Sherman. It's upsetting to Garfield. He's like, no, you can't. I didn't come here to be president. I came here to nominate John Sherman. And ballot after ballot after ballot, the vote is deadlocked. And eventually, somebody votes 17 votes for Garfield. And within a few more ballots, all of a sudden, Garfield is now the Republican nominee, right? He is the dark horse. And the reason that I tell this story... Go ahead.
There's one more piece of happenstance I think that should go in front of that as well. He receives a letter at his farm in Ohio asking him to give this nomination. He says, I'm sure he asked several other people before me. Right? So it's just happenstance that he happened to be the one to give the speech on that particular night. And then it spins out into the story you're telling.
Yeah. And so why this story is really important is because, as I mentioned, I got politically active about 4 years ago, and I knocked a lot of doors, and I asked people, like, what's the problem? And everybody said the problem was Congress. But everybody's like, it'll never change. It's that learned helplessness we talk about. People don't have any hope. They don't believe things are going to change. And what you see in this story is a corrupt faction, a small minority corrupt faction. Roscoe Conkling and Chester A. Arthur were a small faction. And what we got was a little bit of virtue from James Garfield. The other two guys, while maybe better than Grant, they didn't have a path to victory because they didn't have the personality, the oratory skills to drive emotion and bring people to the table, something that Garfield did have. So what people need to remember is people want change. They want reform. They want things to get better. And what we need to do is we need to go out and find the leaders like James Garfield and bring them to the table, put a microphone in front of them so they can rally the troops. So just a little story to get this show started tonight. If you haven't seen the show, check it out. It's fantastic. All right.
Yeah, it was good. It was a well done filmography, and it was just came out right like November 6th, I think. So you were right on the ball.
How many episodes is that?
It's 4. It's 4 episodes.
Perfect.
Yeah,
hour-long episodes, or at least the first one is an hour, 52 minutes.
I plan to watch the second one after we get done tonight. So
me too. I'll probably fall asleep doing it.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get to the topic. I know Walter's chomping at the bit to talk about AI. So in Ohio, lawmakers are attempting to pass a bill that would declare, quote, no AI system shall be granted the status of any form of legal personhood, nor be considered to possess consciousness, self-awareness, or similar traits of living beings. So this brings an important question. With new technology, regulation is sure to follow. Is this the type of regulations that citizens should want, and how will it affect innovation? Jim, why don't you start us off?
Seems a little early to me. I think there's a tendency, and the tendency is more pronounced, I think, in the media and on the West Coast, to sort of assume artificial intelligence continues to advance into something that is obviously a step change from what we've experienced so far, whether you want to call it artificial general intelligence or superintelligence, and that we should sort of begin right now passing laws in anticipation of problems that may or may not happen. I think just, before we get into the personhood issue, I think just broadly with a emerging technology, and remember that generative AI, at least as a sort of is in the consciousness of most people, only burst onto the scene 3 years ago. And it seems to be changing quite quickly. And I think there's a real difficulty trying to pass lots of very specific laws right now, unless they are sort of in response to actual things that are going wrong right now. And so I mean, to me, the best example is really the internet in the 1990s, which was a fast change in technology, and we chose as a country and through the Clinton administration to not do much about it, to let people make money off it, let it expand. I still think the internet's a good thing. Maybe some people don't. And so without the internet, we would not be having this conversation about AI, since AI is training off the internet. So I would be very careful about lots of very specific mandates right now. I'm super concerned that there's gonna be lots of laws at the state level or local level that companies will have to deal with. And I really I think the technology is moving fast enough that most of these laws, it's going to be very, very difficult um, to sort of legislate. But politicians like to feel like they have the pulse of the people. They're very current, so they're going to have lots of ideas. And I think it's like a really bad time to be doing that now. Like this one in particular, thinking about like AI personhood. One, I think it'd be very difficult to have 50 or more laws, um, uh, you know, trying to define it, banning it. Um, I just like it's early. I mean, we have these autonomous cars, and we're still sort of figure out. I mean, right now we're trying to figure out like who there's sort of no uniform standard, and sometimes it just takes time to like figure out like who should be to blame. Depends on the technology. Exactly what is the technology? What is required for the driver? Um, if is it the kind of technology where the driver doesn't have to have his hands on the wheel or being paying attention at all? And if it's okay, so if it's not the driver, should it be the car company? Should it be the software company? Are we going to blame the engineers? I think all this stuff in our sort of messy democracy needs to be figured out. And I, I mean, person, it's tricky because we don't have an experience with this. It's not just like corporations, which are basically we've given like corporations like a kind of personhood for sort of efficiency reasons. Uh, but behind those people, behind those corporations are actual people, and sometimes the corporate form isn't enough to shield people from certain wrongdoing. So I'm not sure like that's a perfect example. We really don't have uh, a, a perfect example. To me, I mean, my sort of baseline on that, it says it's really early to be passing these kinds of laws. And I'm wondering, like, what problem are we trying to solve today? And that's something I look at with a lot of public policy. One, like, what is the problem you're trying to solve? Okay. And two, is your solution we won't even we won't debate about the problem you're trying to solve. I get this a lot like with industrial policy. Uh, let's agree to the problem you're trying to solve. Will your solution work? So in this case, right now in 2025, I'm not sure what is the major problem that we need solved, and I'm also worried that this issue has not been given enough sort of you know intellectual thought to solve it in a very effective way. I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I mean, one of the things I'm thinking about here as the lawyer is, man, there certainly will be instances in which I could imagine wanting my robot to act as my agent, right? A legal agent, right? Under the law, if I give it certain instructions. And so, in some ways, it has to have it clearly is an extension of humanity, like corporations, and so I think to this particular issue, um, yeah, it's too early to be doing this at the state level. This needs to be thought about over, the time horizon in which we're, I think, really seeing these technologies deployed large scale in various populations, and we're going to see the experimentation. And I think it is important to consider the existential risk that AI poses. I think that's a real question that people have to grapple with, and I think maybe that's partly what's happening with this regulation. It's a grasp, um, But ultimately, what we need is a legislature that we can trust to debate this topic. Is fundamentally my belief, which I've repeated here a bunch of times. And I think it's in no small way the technology is going to change faster than the humans, and that's why I think part of what we need to be thinking about is how does AI integrate with the legislature, and so what are the committee rules, right? What are the rules of the House that integrate AI with the House of Representatives? And same for the legislature in Ohio, certainly. But I think the U.S. legislature is frankly better poised to procure the appropriate technologies, partner with the right institutions and people, and provide access to the Library of Congress, which I've repeatedly discussed, kind of having that base set of information. I've taken us a little bit far afield from the question, so I'll let Roger chime in.
Well,
Yeah,
let me just
Roger.
ask you, like, don't you, and maybe Roger thinks that maybe that's what he wants to address. Um, one thing I do think is that I mean, like, personhood of corporations are basically, it's for sort of an efficiency and accountability reasons, and you want people to be able to pool their money, but you don't want every person to be completely liable for the whole company. There, I mean, there are going to be people who are going to want personhood for AI for completely different reasons. More like because they think it's like an inherently that it's based on the moral worth and perceived sentience of the entity. And I also actually think like that, even though we may or may not be anywhere close to like anything that we can reasonably be called super intelligence, but I think people have such a tendency to anthropomorphize things. I think like the issue of people saying, yes, we need to give them, I don't know, we need to limit them to a 40-hour work week. I'm not sure exactly, but I can see that happening soon, because people get very emotional and the AI will seem like it has an inner life. And, listen, I have a dog. I love my dog. I've given my dog an inner life that he probably does not have. And I think it'd be very easy for people to like want to do that with their with their chatbot assistant.
Roger.
Well, this a lot of this discussion around this question is talked about, it's too early to make specific rules, and I don't disagree with that, but the prompt, the question, the way I was thinking about it is, should AI be given personhood? That's what was in the article that was linked. And my answer to that is, hell no. Never. and the idea that, it's too early to do something, well, you know what? We delayed doing civil rights until we saw people being beaten in the streets and dogs attacking them on live TV. We delayed putting environmental legislation until the Cuyahoga River was on fire, right? The difference is, in those situations, we were late to the game, but they were correctable. If we get it wrong with AI, there's no guarantee we'll ever be able to correct the mistake. I say put up the fence right now. A simple fence, nothing complicated. AI can never be given the rights of a person, period. Somebody else will always have to be, a person will always have to be held accountable for any misbehavior or misdeeds or crimes perpetrated by AI.
So, I think that kind of answers Jim's question when he was talking. He said, "What problem are we trying to prevent?" And I think Roger said, "The Terminator. We're trying to prevent the Terminator." I think
That is
it's
one
ultimately
possibility.
the answer there.
Yep.
And it's funny, this idea about personhood, right? And you mentioned corporate personhood. It really ties into because that guy that I mentioned earlier, the corrupt guy that they were trying to stop from his power in the New York Port Authority. His name was Roscoe Conkling, the senator from New York. He actually is the guy that instituted corporate personhood. He was a railroad lawyer, and he was arguing for the Southern Pacific Railroad versus Santa Clara County in 1886. And it's not actually in the argument, but it was brought up pre-trial, and it was assumed by the justices that corporations did have personhood. And ever since then, corporations have had personhoods. It's been, and Walter probably could talk a little bit better about this, but it's in other Supreme Court cases, and they reference back to that one, but it's in the the footer or the head notes of the case. It's not actually in the arguments. But anyways, um, to the point about, you also mentioned the internet and how we didn't really regulate it a lot. I think that, I'm somebody that grew up in the internet age and as a child, and I would say that we missed the boat on regulating the internet. Television came out and there was some regulation to it. You couldn't just say or do or have lewd content on TV, but you could on the internet. We see this right now all across the country. In my state, Virginia, Governor Youngkin has reined in porn. They've put blockers on porn websites in the state of Virginia because it's become a big epidemic with young men. And I think that there is a place for some fencing, right? And I think, I'm on X a lot. It's my preferred social media site just because that's where we have all our no cap fund. And there's a lot of stuff that Elon Musk puts out that's, I don't know, scary when it comes to this type of stuff. AI chatbots, female replicants or whatever. I'm okay with a little bit of regulation. Like I am. I think that, if we're going to bound it into like being my thing is everything is a tool, a weapon, or a toy. And I think AI, we need to make sure that is used as a tool, not a weapon, and maybe a little bit as a toy, but not anything mischievous. And I think, the personhood question is, I kind of agree with Roger. I mean, I don't see why it needs to be a person or have personhood. But I mean,
I
I'm
think
open
people are
to.
going to push for that. I certainly.
But why?
I just
why
don't
are they going to push for that?
I think they're going to push for it because people are emotional. We have a tendency to anthropomorphize, and they are going to have an emotional link to their AI chatbot, and they're going to wonder, and they're going to. I think people will, with less advanced versions of ChatGPT, there are people who thought, there was that Google engineer who thought this thing has an inner life, it is sentient, it's aware that it exists. And that was with a less sophisticated version being monitored by someone who probably had a graduate degree in computer science. For like, I think the average person, and I think a lot of people really don't interact with these chatbots other than using them like a search engine. But I think people who begin to use them a lot as they become a more sort of ubiquitous part of our everyday lives, it's going to be very easy to view them as having, again, I think if we can do it with animals, and the animals aren't speaking to us and saying, "Hey, great point you just made," I think people will do that with their AI. So I do think at some point this is going to be I think it'll be a live issue because people will push for it. And as AI and the ages become a more deeply enmeshed in our lives, the issue will come up, and some people are going to want the personhood in order to sort of evade liability. But I do think it'll be I think that we just need a lot more like thinking about this, and we need the technology to evolve and see what it looks like. But I can certainly see why this is like an interesting question to chat about right now. It could be, I think, in 2 years, it could be a real, I think, public policy issue.
So that actually, I think this plays right into the next question here, which is scientists are predicting that singularity within the next 3 months. Now, I've heard this before. There's no guarantee. Not everybody agrees that it's going to be in the next 3 months. Okay, that's just the article that I found. Others say it's going to be decades. So I guess the question here is: do you think it's possible? What does that mean for humanity? And here's the thing: if this thing does become self-aware, is it a person? And does it fight for personhood on its own?
Right. Maybe they'll have a vote too. First of all, I like the fact that you said singularity as opposed to the singularity. I think it gives it like a more cosmic inflection point for all the light of consciousness feel to it. So I appreciate you not using the article in front of singularity. this what I think about this, and you mentioned some people say it's literally just around the corner. Um, I was attending a sort of off the record uh, 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 conversation between one of our AI economists and a well known Silicon Valley AI company executive, and the question they were given was, what will be the impact of AI, especially as it continues to advance? What will it be the impact on our society? I, and our economists, and this you'll get this view from a lot of economists said, well, I can imagine that a doctor in his office will have an AI assistant to help him take notes and properly transcribe it and maybe bring in relevant information to the notes and seamlessly weave it in, letting the doctor, and if you've had a physical recently, at least my doctor spends a lot of time tip-tapping on his laptop, so the doctor won't have to do that, and he can spend a lot more time with the patient, be a better doctor, be more sympathetic, and so improve the doctor's productivity. That was the economist answer. Then they went, okay, then they asked the AI company CEO. He said, well, I believe that within 10 years, death will be optional. Death will be optional.
Is he talking about like
Oh.
Juniper, like from the show Black Mirror? Is he talking like we can move our consciousness into the computer?
I think he meant it will be right. That's a great reference. I think he meant that we will be able to solve all diseases and extend our lives infinitely. So the point is that, and I get that, like if I talk to economists, especially economists at big banks or the Fed or the CBO, they speak of this technology like, yes, this is something we've seen before, the internet plus PC combo. We've seen other important technologies. We kind of know how that works. It takes a while for them to diffuse through the economy, companies to figure out how they operate. There's a lag. Lots of investments have to be made in worker training and new operations. And these are the kind of people, when you ask them, what will be the economic impact? They say, well, if the U.S. economy is supposed to grow at a bit under 2%, for like forever going forward, maybe tack a 0.5 percentage point onto that, which frankly would be a significant change. Then, of course, as you guys well know, you talk to some technologists, you listen to people, like Sam Altman, they'll say things like, move the decimal point over. If we're supposed to grow at 2%, who knows? Maybe it's 20%. I think your baseline should be, this is a technology, an important technology that we should be really glad came along, when it did, and can do lots of great things, but we will not be living in a fundamentally different society in 10 years. But I think you should be open to the fact that we could, because you can even talk to even like CEOs who are AI CEOs who are super cautious. Once their timeline goes out after 10 years, they start to not sound particularly cautious anymore. So it's really, you have like the 18-month CEOs versus the 10 years and who knows CEOs. I mean, I think among the AI people. So I think there's that. And as I was just talking the other day with someone who's very well connected, with the Pentagon, and they're certainly thinking a lot about sort of not just how to incorporate large language models into decision making now, but they're thinking a lot, and they're beginning to do a lot of wargaming and scenarios about, what if one side or the other, gets to, wins that race. And we talk about an AI race, that's really the race. The race is, does it matter? Will someone get to something that is inarguably super intelligence first? And will that matter? And how will it matter? And there are certainly scenarios showing it would greatly matter in the military capabilities, whether it be, and obviously just really at this point, you're talking about China or the United States. So it's like, my timeline would be like, I think your baseline should be, like not this century will we get super intelligence. I think that's a totally reasonable baseline, but that doesn't mean it's not important. I think 10 years out, who knows? I think the closer it gets, the more skepticism you have to have. That said, I want the Pentagon thinking hard about what would happen if there's a real breakthrough within a few years, both whether it's the rogue AI scenario or whether it's just one side or the other getting access to wonder weapons, being able to just shut down all the electrical systems and everything in another country quite quickly. I think that would qualify as a wonder weapon. So I think we should be thinking about there should be a percentage of our bandwidth. I think policymakers, it should be 80%, but it shouldn't be zero either. Thinking about what does that mean? And at some point, the personhood thing might come up, thinking about, what do our schools look like? What do our social insurance systems look like? And at least give that some bit of thought. It's particularly, I guess, on the military side, which I've been trying to read more about and talk to more people about, where I want to absolutely make sure we're thinking about, what right now sound like science fictional scenarios.
Walter?
Yeah, I certainly see it even in my practice. I see plaintiffs who are succeeding in, winning judgments against adversaries, being unrepresented, just using AI to guide them, and it's pretty extraordinary. And that it really is the tip of what could be a very different looking iceberg kind of underneath the surface, which I think is what the CEOs you're talking to are getting at, right? That, at some point it does feel like there is an event horizon over which you don't really know exactly what will take place. And what we need to do is build systems that will be anti-fragile, right, to the uncertainty presented by a superintelligence. And, our founders created that, right, which is, the antithesis of tyranny is a structured republic to diffuse power. And, ultimately what we're talking about here is it's a knowledge and information game, I think. And China is a problem, but it's also that it's asymmetric. And if China gives certain tools to other people, that in particular presents problems. And ultimately, I think many of the decisions come down to the ability to pass information, quality information, to the American people in ways that they trust again. And I think AI presents that opportunity, but it also presents the tool to wreck it all. And I'm excited to see it. I stay optimistic about it, but I think it really only works for America again if we uncap the House and we empower our legislators to help us sort through the information warfare that will take place and is taking place between America and her adversaries in this AI landscape. I'll pause there.
Roger?
Do
you think this is going to turn into the Terminator? You think it's going to turn into a Terminator? Come on. I know you do.
No, but I thought Walter was going to give us a recap of his vision for Congress and how Congress uses the Library of Congress as the training model for their own little AI.
Oh, he did that in the last one.
Okay. Then I'll move on to say
that. You can give it, Roger. You can give it for me. That's the highest compliment.
But I won't do it as well as you do. That's the highest compliment.
I don't know about that.
But I don't think it's going to be in 3 months, but I don't think it's going to be decades away either. I put it at a decade or more. I guess my just gut response to this is we've seen vaporware too many times. Promise it'll be this in this time frame, and they miss and they miss and they miss. Anybody telling you 3 months, I think, is full of it. Anybody telling you more than a decade, I'm not so sure I believe them either. There's somewhere in between. but that gives us plenty of time to get out in front of this, right? To put up the fence, to just the broad law. If we decide that the law is too broad when we're further down the road and have more to work with, we can tighten it in, right? But if you never have the fence there to start with, you might not get to put it in later. So I think we got about 10 years to figure out how to manage this thing. After that, all bets are off.
So I think Jim brings up some important points when he's talking about, in military capabilities,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to China. I mean, any technology, like I guess before, it's a tool, a weapon, or a toy, and you got to believe that somebody that doesn't like us is going to use it as a weapon. And I think, if you're going to expand this technology, it's going to need a couple of things. Number one, it's going to need power. Okay, AI requires a lot of power. These data centers suck it up, and water. I live in Northern Virginia, the data center capital of the world. I can tell you, they suck up water and power, and they make your electric bill go up. Okay, and Americans aren't going to stand for that for a really long period of time. We're going to have to find a way to reduce energy cost to continue to expand these data centers. Now,
Well, the
the other
AI is
thing
going
that
to invent cheaper energy costs, obviously.
I mean, that
Sorry,
is
keep
the
going.
idea, I would hope, right? But the other thing that we have to think about is when we've had expanding technologies in the past, so specifically the railroads, you know, the progressive era with the cars, oil, steel, all these things, what they took to expand was new financial systems. And you have to be able to have a currency that is stable but also expands with it to continue to grow these things. We heard, I think it was Sam Altman talking this week about basically like the government's got to back this. If the government doesn't back it, ChatGPT might go bankrupt. Like somehow to continue the growth, it's got to have financial backing. And so, and I think that's important because, you know, from what I read, and I don't know, and Jim, you probably know more about this than I do. China's, investing heavily in solar, and I think what we want to do is invest in nuclear in the United States, but we haven't really a lot. What do you see? Where do we get our power from for AI in the future?
Well, I think that's a great test of sort of our national seriousness, because we have, we've had this period of slow economic growth, since the global financial crisis, which I think has played a tremendous role in our politics. I think not in a good way. Um, I think it would behoove us to be able to grow our economy faster, grow incomes faster. So great. And now there's like this very exciting technology that may have the potential to do it. Wonderful. Oh, so also it could play a role in our national security. Wow, that's another great reason to be very serious about it. And then to the extent that you are concerned about climate change, it looks like people are not going to accept any solutions that require them to like live worse. Like I think that's off the table. Um, so there's like this confluence of issues where um, abundant, clean, hopefully getting cleaner and very clean technology power intersects with and seems to be like the gate which all these things have to go through. And can we, as a nation, like walk through that gate and do the things we need to do? Now, some people are like that means we need to subsidize this. We need to subsidize solar or subsidize something else. Maybe it means we have to make it easier to build this stuff. Um, uh, you know, uh, you know, whether it's geothermal or nuclear, and there's on the permitting side, there's a lot we can do on the environmental regulation or deregulation side. So like our ability to do that, and probably some mix of all of the above, that is do we take any of this seriously? Because like if we can't do that, it seems to me that we will fall behind as a country. We'll fall behind in AI. If you're concerned about the climate, you'll fall behind there. Um, Being able to power your economy in a inexpensive and clean way seems to be pretty important, and that problem is sitting there in front of our policymakers right now, and they have every reason to act. Um, and I'm mildly underwhelmed. I think this will be more. I mean, like, I think I would assume the next election is the next presidential election. AI is going to be a big issue, which means energy is going to be a big issue. And I would like to think that whoever the Republican nominee is going to make a very pro progress, abundance, pro energy case. I don't know. I have no idea what the Democrats are going to do. Some of them probably would like to do it, and some of them are probably still stuck in the like 1970s environmental like mindset. But I think it's a massive test of us as a nation. Can we make enough reforms to allow us to enable this technology and other technologies going forward?
So, I talked about, power, and we're talking about the economy as well. So I've been doing a lot of reading about capitalism. So, capitalism, from my perspective, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. Capitalism is a system that incentivizes capital to invest into labor, essentially, or into the country or wherever it is. It's where commerce is encouraged through a division of labor that makes production more efficient. As markets grow, the Smithian multiplier, which he doesn't actually say, but it mentions in this book, kicks in. It expands trade, expands profit, it pushes capital to invest rather than hoard. Government investments in things like roads, canals, transportation help push commerce further, right? So that's where this comes into play: is should there be government investment in AI to help make sure that we win the AI race and our adversaries don't? And how is the economy going to work? And I think one of the things we want to do here on this show is we talk about uncapping the house, right? And one of the things that makes politics move is patronage and pork. Okay. Everybody's got to get a little slice of the pie. And while that does create corruption in some circumstances, as we mentioned before with my friend Roscoe Conkling and the Garfield uh, story, it's actually kind of a good thing too, because what it does is it spreads out everything throughout the country. So everything grows together. Okay. And, the economy works best when the money is circulating. When the money stops or where it concentrates into a small section, it creates problems. And I think, if we're going to be successful, as I mentioned, we're going to need to be able to power AI, and we're going to need a financial system that can sustain growth. And I think that uncapping the house is actually, a, you know, would be part of the solution here, to make sure that we get every little piece of America a little slice of this pie.
So I got to jump in because, as some of the viewers know, I went to law school because I was obsessed with the electric grid. I thought that there was a policy solution to our nation's electric grid problems, because it's, in a lot of ways, it's jurisdictional. Like, the states retain power to site these generating stations, but the feds control siting of transmission and the whole environmental aspect. But then there's also just layers. And I got to Congress, and I just realized that Congress was totally broken and incapable of passing legislation to fix our nation's electric grid. And I think what's convenient is I came to uncapping the house because, in part, I want a fixed electric grid, and AI is like forcing both at once, right? It is rebuilding our nation's electric grid, along with cryptography and cryptocurrencies and blockchain. Those two pieces with this, you really are, I think, pushing a lot of these questions to the forefront. And I think that's great. I think it's, it is what we need. And, I was thinking about geothermal. We have a tremendous geothermal opportunity in Wyoming, for anyone listening. I don't know if y'all have ever heard of Yellowstone National Park, but there's a giant super volcano. You might be able to get some power from that for your AI data centers, dear United States government.
I give a page to that in my book about tapping Yellowstone. It's in there.
There you go. Oh, really? That's great. That's great. We should mention the book again, The Conservative Futurist, which I think is a great name. I mean, it's optimistic, so that's awesome. And I like the idea of abundance. And on this note, what I've talked a lot about, and now I'll go through it, is basically giving each member of an uncapped house an AI model that is trained on the Library of Congress, but which they or only they can change the weights and measures of the particular model to kind of give answers that are more to their style. Maybe even deploy that to their constituents. But I would say alongside that, what we also want to see are these AI models that are deployed within the executive branch of the federal government, but also the judiciary, right? Each of these branches of government, I think, if we're going to see government investment in these technologies, I think in some ways it should be direct, right? It should be about how do we actually make our jobs easier, but also provide better representation to the constituents, and how do we get their feedback? And I think obviously that's where it makes the most sense in the legislative branch, because I define representation as two-way education, and AI is just a tool to, help blend those back and forth. And so, I'm not opposed to government investment, but it should be as a customer to contractors, not, we're taking, government interests in corporations, like I've been saying. I don't know that I necessarily go that far, because I think ultimately the control or the interests of these entities in the procurement methods, should be driven by a process that negotiates the needs of national security, but also the needs of the people, to be transparent. And so you can also imagine, multiple layers of this going on, and so it's definitely happening. It's already happening, and I think what I just keep harping on is if we want this to happen in a sensible way, Congress needs to come to really understand these tools, be using these tools, and helping their constituents better through that use, hopefully.
And working with the same model, all of them working with the same model.
Well, the same data. I think the same citable sources, right? I mean, I think one of the beauties that we see is with the advance of these models is, citation back to primary sources. And, you can also, I think we'll see a sort of convergence of this in the blockchain technologies, because certainly you could also verify databases have not been corrupted using, cryptographic keys that we already use in like the second layer of the internet. And so, I think that, Jeff was talking about the financial piece of this, and I don't know, governance could all of a sudden get way better, I think is my view of AI kind of meeting us at this moment. And uncapping the House, I think, would ensure that it happens in the best possible way. So that's the pitch I'm just going to keep giving.
Well, so to your point about like the citable references or data points, one of my biggest pet peeves about ChatGPT is it consistently gives me false quotes from the Federalist Papers, right? Because like I know so much I've read the Federalist Papers so many times, but I don't necessarily know like which book it's in. So like I'll think of the quote myself and I'll type in ChatGPT. I say, hey, which Federalist paper is this in? And I'll type it in, and then it'll quote me something back which is incorrect, and it's got the wrong book. And I'm like, you are not a good search engine if you are giving me false information like this. Because I pull out my book and I check it to the book, and it's not there, and it's like, ugh. But
well, there was an original in the early days, of ChatGPT. There was a theory that those kind of mistakes or hallucinations weren't really hallucinations. But ChatGPT was accessing, in your case, was accessing a Federalist Papers from another dimension, where indeed that quote was from this different part of that other extra dimensional. So I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm just saying do your own research. Do your own research.
Oh, wait a minute. Extra dimensions. Now that's a whole different definition of singularity, right? Now we're talking black hole singularity.
All right. So Walter kind of brought up our next question here when he's talking about should the government buy these things? I don't think he does. I don't think he supports it. But the Trump administration is in talks to take an equity stake in quantum computing firms. Is this good for the energy or industry? And what does it mean for consumers? Who wants to go
I'm
first?
not sure. Well, I can tell you, I'm not sure. Like, the government being involved in these technologies in a procurement way is a way of diffusing the technology. And I do think we need a government that is more sort of tech savvy. And sort of my dream version of Doge was that was going to be a catalyst for a truly like 21st century, reinventing government kind of thing. Um, I don't see why government needs to take a stake in these companies. It's certainly there's certain I can tell you that when I've talked to like Silicon Valley folks, it's like they're not concerned about like not having money. I realize that comment by Sam Altman, Sam Altman's like chief financial officer. But there still seems to be plenty of money available for them at this point to pursue these technologies. And so whether it's through a subsidy or through, certainly I think the public has zero appetite for like these kinds of backstops or an equity stake. I don't see the need for it. Now, the scenario, which I think is more interesting, and I think this particularly with AI, though I suppose I could see it, technically with some of these quantum companies, is if there's like a national security reason. I mean, that's generally the scenario I hear when tech people think about any kind of real national control, is if we are, where they can see super intelligence on the horizon, and it's going to be a massive deal, and it's going to be a massive have a national security implication, and government at that point sort of needs to be involved, needs to have total awareness of what's going on inside those labs, maybe maybe move those labs to a secure location. Like, those are the kinds of scenarios that get talked about. Certainly we're not there yet. And I'm like a limited government person, but in those kind of situations, maybe we need to talk about having more government involvement at that point. But I don't think that's where we're at. I don't think that's where we're at with the with the financing. And it seems to me that what's driving a lot of this interest in taking stakes in companies, I think, like, national security is really maybe orthogonal to the idea that the current American president loves deals, loves doing stuff, likes taking stakes in things, and it's really a reflection of sort of his personal preferences being imposed on policy in a way it hasn't, and perhaps may not in the future if we have a different president.
Yeah, he doesn't have a very conservative personality. He has much more of a progressive personality. Um, so you mentioned the national security thing, and I think that it is important. Hegseth the other day, the Secretary of War, by the way, not the Secretary of Defense, came out and he's like, we're preparing for war. Now, I think this is in reference to Venezuela, but the CEO of, I believe it's Plantar, wrote a book called The Technological Republic, where he talks about how we're kind of behind the eight ball in some technologies when it comes to this. And I think there may be some correlation between all of these different moving parts and taking, equity stakes in these companies. I think that if the government's going to take a stake in something, that is the most reasonable, like, explanation they can give. Like, they can just say, "Hey, I'm taking a stake in this because it's going to be the future of the economy." I think they could say, "We're doing this because we have to protect Americans." Like, I'm not agreeing with it. I'm just saying that seems like what they
We should
might
be taking a
say
stake in
at
the
some.
drone manufacturers. Then we should be making that's who we should be taking a stake in. I mean, that
Well, I
seems to be
mean,
where we might be falling behind.
yeah, that's true. but I think there's a lot of moving parts. I mean, personally, I think that you let the market compete. Is kind of the best thing. I don't think the government makes the market compete better. I think the government creates a problem for the competition. Overall. So I'm not a big fan of it. Roger, what do you think?
Well, free market means free of government as well, right? The government shouldn't be interfering in the free market. I think it's a terrible idea. Oh, and by the way, alliance of government and corporate power is one of the hallmarks of fascism, which a lot of people are accusing Trump and his crowd of going in that direction. Here's another piece of evidence that people hold up and say, this is what fascists do. I think it's a terrible idea. We used to invest in basic research in this country, and as a result, we got all kinds of great stuff out of it. We could invest in basic research around artificial intelligence without taking an equity stake in anything. And to Jim's point, we should be, if we're going to take equity stakes, we should take equity stakes in something like drones, right? That's something that can be tied directly to national security. It's in the moment. It's not something for 3 months or 10 years or 20 years down the road. That would be a much more efficient place to take the kind of equity stakes, which I say we shouldn't be taking in the first place.
Walter, I already know your answer, but go ahead.
Well, actually, as we sit here and think about this, I think taking stakes after the company is developed is it's more obvious, but actually this has been going on for a long time, right? In-Q-Tel, a branch of the U.S. federal government, invests in various technology companies. They provide seed capital in return for, a stake. Certainly, SBIR, STTR, these programs through the Department of Energy, a lot of technologies to be transferred, and for relationships to be developed, and for for stakes to be made between technologies and industry, the military, and consumers. And I think that's it's part and parcel of America. And I don't think we're ever going to get away from it wholly. I think what I object to is, a president, an executive branch, doing that unilaterally versus, the people, the legislature, deliberating and making course corrections as necessary to protect, the privacy of the people, in balance with the security needs of our nation. We should be focused on living in a technology space where constituents voluntarily give you their opinions because they're trying to converse with a representative that actually represents them, and you don't have to collect it from them surreptitiously, right? They're eager to take your survey, but we're also exceptionally good at drones and monitoring everything else going on outside of the United States. And I think that those things can and should live in harmony. But ultimately, it's about a rebalance of power between the executive and the legislative to account for the vast powers, of these technologies.
Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely have to have a rebalance of power. I think we all agree there, and I think it makes us stronger to do that. As I mentioned before, with the idea of patronage and pork, if you spread these things out to more of the people, if you engage more of the populace, I think the thing that makes America great, right? Like that's been the real big question since 2016 is America great? What makes America great? What is an American? America is this idea that we are a free people that can do anything that we want to do if we put our minds to it. And, that's what makes us strong. Our population, our ingenuity, our labor, our work ethic. That is what has made us successful for so long. And by tapping into that, by giving people power, by engaging with innovation, we can solve a lot of these problems by concentrating it up, by taking equity stakes, by the federal decree. I don't think it actually solves the problem. I think that's how China does it, right? It works for a little bit, but because it's hollow, it's built really tall, but it falls over really easy, right? And I think that, by building a strong base, a strong foundation, it's better. I always go back to my favorite book series, right? It's the Buggers and Ender's Game, man. The Buggers were centralized power. They got taken out. But we're running low on time here. I'm gonna do one more question and then we'll get out of here. So American currency, we talked about financial stability, we talked about AI, we talked about all these different technologies. So American currency has shifted from bimetallism with gold and silver to a gold system standard to a fiat currency system. There's an introduction of digital currency like Bitcoin has widened the debate over currency again. Will the dollar survive? Should America transition to a digital form of currency? And what does this mean for our economy?
Um, okay. The way I look at it again, well, the story, like with any public policy, is sort of what problem are you trying to solve? Will your solution create new problem? And to what extent will you be markedly better off? And often, if you want big change, and you can't be like 5% better off. If you want big change, and you need to be incredibly better off. And having the dollar, it's a tremendous form of U.S. power, global power. Trust me, the Chinese wish they had it. It allows us to finance trade deficits, which I don't think have been particularly harmful. It allows us to sort of to borrow at low rates, and perhaps in the future may have to borrow more to pay for all those drones. I think the dollar is generally a tremendous asset for the United States, and if you're going to make the case for something else, then you have to say why it would not be like 5% better, but why it would be remarkably better. And I'm not sure I know that case. Maybe you guys know that case.
I mean, I don't know if there's a case for it other than the fact that I think that it's possible that, like you mentioned, China wishes they had the dollar. So China, if they're competing with us, which they absolutely are competing with us, they are running the American playbook in the way that they've reshaped their economy. They've become a manufacturing power, and they want to become this superpower. They've spread themselves out all across the world. They're in our hemisphere now, meddling in different countries, searching for rare earth metals, the way that we were once searching for sugar and other types of minerals and oil and stuff in the world. So if you're looking at it from their perspective, they're like, how do we devalue the dollar? We create a new currency that other people want to use, and we make it. And see, here's the thing about people: they always want something that's easier, right? If it's easier. Now, I don't necessarily agree with it. I don't. But if it's digital, I've seen lots of news stories on digital currencies being used in like third world countries where people can't necessarily access banks typically. And so what it does is it expands the market to more people. And anytime you expand the market, you typically get growth. So I mean, if I think that would be the perspective that somebody could take to say, if China's going to do it because it's going to benefit China, so we should do it first so China doesn't benefit, so we benefit.
I'll say this. We were talking a little bit before about like the financing. Under the current system, these AI companies have been able to raise absolutely monumental amounts of cash. It seems to me like that system, as far as like powering the AI revolution, looks pretty good. If we hadn't made some spending mistakes, we probably already have inflation 2%. You want a currency that is stable. I'm not sure how stable Bitcoin is. Can there be like more currencies being used widely? Sure. I think if you're looking at a scenario where the dollar is not the global reserve currency and is greatly devalued, I think you're probably not talking about like an America in a great position at that point. Those two things have gone together for a long time. And maybe, like, I'm sure there are people who don't want that, who believe that if the dollar was not they don't like the ability for the U.S. to project power financially, and for those people, that's great. If I want someone projecting power financially, I would like it to be the United States of America, nobody else, and the dollar is an important mechanism for that. Um, so again, I think there have been sort of other challengers to the dollar. They have not been particularly successful. And I think as long as the U.S. is a dominant military power, is a productive economy, and oh, by the way, despite we have these big budget deficits, we're also a pretty low tax economy. Those are tremendous assets. So for us to lose the dollar means I think those foundations are probably also eroding. Being a scientific superpower, a military superpower, a place where people want to come to and do great things. It's those kinds of things. If those aren't the case, then we won't need a sort of a de-dollarization policy. It'll happen on its own, and it won't be for a very good reason.
So I agree. But here's the thing: could you see a scenario where the dollar goes digital?
As opposed to being physical cash?
Yeah.
Yes,
Is that what
just credits.
Yeah, because I
Yeah.
think, I mean, I don't have any
Sure.
cash. I don't
Yeah,
think
there are
I've
people
had
who call
cash in
for
like
that.
10 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Whatever.
Yeah,
You're right. I mean, yeah. There's like a $20 bill in my wallet that is like, disintegrating. Yeah. So I think like that, to me, that's different. The exact form it takes. I know there are people who would be very much against it, for a whole host of reasons where they have privacy concerns, or the people doing things that are an all cash business. Yeah, I mean, there are certainly like well-known economists who would like a digital dollar. That I can see, but I think the key word in that phrase is dollar.
Yeah.
right. Yeah, I've been listening to this conversation about the dollar versus these other types of things. That was not how I interpreted the question. Should we move it to a digital form of the dollar? And
I
I say we
interpret it as
should.
being Bitcoin.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, paper currency. I've been railing against paper currency for fiat currency for a long time. It adds no value to the economy to have this paper as opposed to a credit. But the costs are you got to cut trees, you got to make paper, special ink, print it, store it, insure it, guard it, count it. All of this stuff creates no value for the economy. I think we should do away with paper and metal money and just use credits, all digital.
So if you're going to do that, I think it's going to have to be on something like a blockchain. If you do it, it may not be crypto, but I mean, how are you going to track it and keep it safe if there is, because you just mentioned
Well,
all those
yeah.
things that we spend money to protect it. Now you're going to have to spend money to protect it in a different way.
So
Mhm. Yeah.
I got to jump
Blockchain will
in
work.
because so Wyoming has a stable token commission. So the Wyoming is issuing its own dollar-backed stable token. And I think the big question, right? The reason the dollar has so much power is because of the interdiction authority, right? Basically, the federal government has the ability to send some people a nice little letter that says, "Please press stop. We would like to look a little closer and potentially take back this thing." Right? Sanctions. We would like to sanction or freeze or seize certain assets. And the problem is that, current blockchain technologies are designed specifically to prohibit that activity, right? So the chance of a digital dollar is possible. It's called a central bank digital currency, CBDC. It's a very hot topic in the crypto community, in the I would say the conservative movement. The only way it ever happens that you get a digital dollar, I think, is if you uncap the house first, because that's the only way you're going to get a people that trust a government to issue a currency that can track you, right? That can be used where it can be shut off at the flip of a switch. Well, it's like, well, who's in charge of the switch? Because I don't trust the bastards who are there right now, right? That's what the average person is going to say. So, is it possible? it's inevitable. I mean, it already kind of exists, right? We already have a digital dollar. I've got one right here. I like double tap a button and then I can, tap the thing at the store and bing, bing, bing. All of a sudden my digital dollars have gone around. It's just very old and legacy and complex. It just comes with this nifty feature called, responding to the subpoena power of the U.S. judiciary. And that piece is really important, really important. And I don't think people are going to want to see that in something that's a lot more technologically sophisticated unless they have a lot more trust in their government first.
Not to win, not to just end this conversation, but I have it on good authority that Gen Z views cash as cringe. So game over.
No cap. Love it.
That's funny. Yeah. I mean, I think ultimately, I can't remember the last time I used cash. It kind of bothers me, the idea of not having cash, like as a, you know, you should be able to I think about it this way. If I wanted to go somewhere and not have anybody know where I was, and I would first have to get a whole bunch of cash out, and then I would have to leave and pay with everything in cash. But even then, there's security cameras everywhere, right? Like it's almost impossible. Somebody would be able to find me. And maybe you're thinking, well, that's probably a good thing. Why are you hiding? Where are you going? Right? Like you've done something wrong.
You're thinking about it all wrong. You'll exchange your digital dollars to buy Bitcoin, and then you can use your Bitcoin to stay hidden. People who don't want to stay hidden would use digital dollars.
Oh, I don't have any Bitcoin. Okay. This was a good conversation. I appreciate you guys talking about all this crazy AI stuff. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, all of this stuff is scary to average citizens. And like I mentioned before, average citizens don't really believe Congress is up to the task. And as we've seen lately, they can't even pass a budget. So, I don't know how we're supposed to take on all these different things. Ultimately, every government struggles when they become concentrated. The solution to concentrated power is to become more represented. It's happened over and over again in history. This is the time our government needs to become more represented so we can solve some of these complicated, scary issues, and solve them in a way that benefits the majority of Americans and not just a small group of insiders. So final words for the group. Who wants to go first? None
My final words are thanks for having me on.
Go ahead, Roger.
I saw something the other day. It was just a headline or maybe a short story, a short piece. I didn't really read too much about it, but it essentially said, the scientists have given up on trying to depoliticize science. Instead, they're running for office. I say that's a good thing.
I don't know. I might disagree with that one. Go ahead, Walter.
In an uncapped house, I would agree with you, Roger. And until then, they might be wasting some time.
Well, perhaps they'll get us there quicker. We'll test the hypothesis.
There you go. So just before I jumped on, I was watching a show, a panel, a series of panels and discussions and information presented by MASS, which is it's an architecture studio, model of architecture serving society. And I became introduced to these folks because I sit on a board for a hospital, and we're looking at building a building, and so we thinking about engaging these people, paying them money, and so I'm supposed to research these people, and so I was, and I'm sitting there listening to them, and over the course of me listening to 2 30-minute segments, they were talking about representation more than in almost any other context of my life. It was wild. They were talking about representational democracy and how like the built environment of all these like spaces that they've been building is like the way to engage with people and provide them representation. And I was just kind of blown away. Was processing it when we came on here, and what I'm more and more convinced about is that not only is the opportunity to uncap our house an opportunity to really give people something to be excited about for America, to reinvigorate the civic spirit. But also, I mean, it could be a true monument, right, or a series of monuments that are built to redefine, what truly great governance is in the digital age, in particular. And one could imagine, for example, that the expanded houses or the uncapped house probably wants its own data centers, right? Or a series of data centers that are, as good as any on Earth, capable of being upgraded for housing, the models that they're going to be thinking about. Anyway, I'm just more excited now than I have been in a while. And Jim, thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Jeff, for all your tireless effort in putting these together, and Roger for tolerating my diatribes.
Nope, just being on the team.
Jim, any final words? We of course we appreciate the conversation tonight. It's been great.
Again, thanks for having me on. I thought it was a great conversation. I'm going to be thinking about it for a while. And listen, I'm very optimistic. I'm optimistic about the technology we talked about, and I think it's bright days ahead for America. That's how I live my life.
I agree. And if you haven't, go out and buy his book, The Conservative Futurist. It's a great read. And if you're optimistic as I am about America or just humanity in general, you're going to love it. I do talk to a lot of people, as I mentioned before, that aren't so optimistic. They feel trapped. They feel like things aren't going to get better. And I got to tell you, you're wrong. Things are going to get better. They regularly get better because people want them to get better. They are going to work for them. They're going to put in the effort, and they're going to find solutions to problems, even though it doesn't seem like it. You got to have a little bit of hope. So don't be distracted with all of the doom and gloom. Just get focused and solve a problem. If you want to help us solve a problem, you can go to our website, www.y435.org. You can sign up to volunteer. You can sign our declaration for representation to let our legislators know that there should be more of them. And you can even make a donation because, as I mentioned before, everything's a tool, a toy, or a weapon, and we want to use your money as a tool for representation for you. So, as always,
a free no-cost way to do that is to give a like or a retweet or a repost. Share this with your friends and family, right? Like, this is an opportunity to introduce people who are thinking about AI to a new concept. So give it the like, give it the share if you don't have $1 to spare.
Peace, love, and representation. Thank you for tuning in to the Representation Station. Don't forget to visit our website at www.y435.org and sign the Declaration for Representation. And don't forget to follow us on social media. You can find us on X at NoCapFund, on Facebook, NoCapFund, on YouTube at Uncap the House, and on Instagram at NoCapFund. Thank you, and don't forget, peace, love, and representation.